Bonjour everyone and welcome back to my channel, The Waves of Your Soul. Today's video is gonna be a show and tell of my top 5 Oracle decks of 2021. So those are the decks that came into my life in 2021. They might have been published in 2021, they might have been published before, but they were new to me and they arrived in my Tarot Oracle library in 2021. I wanted to do a top 5 so that this video wouldn't be too long, but honestly I could have done a top 10. Story of my life. It was very hard to decide, but I think I've narrowed it down. And if it is your first time here, I want to say a huge welcome. My name is Marine. I'm a French tarot reader and a lover of everything tarot, oracle and self-empowerment related. I love posting content on tarot and oracle decks such as this. I also love reading the cards and posting videos on tarot readings, empowering guidance, all of that good stuff. So if you'd like to see any more of those things on your timeline, make sure to hit the subscribe button. I would love to have you. No pressure, but I post every single week. So, you know, if you want to see a little bit more tarot content over here, this is the place to be. And without further ado, let's get into my top 5 Oracle decks of 2021. Before I get into the top 5, I had to do some honorable mentions quickly because it was really hard to pick 5. I just wanted to say a couple of decks that stood out to me this year, you know, that almost made the top, that I still think are amazing. It just sounded better top 5, okay? I was just looking for a cute title. Top 5 sounded better than like top 8 or top 9, and then I felt like top 10 was too much, because then it's like, is it a top if it's a top 10 of the year, even though I definitely have a top 10 of the year, but you know, anyway, I'm just talking shit now. Honorable mentions: L'Oracle du Règne Animal by Sarah Wilder, which is a French version of an animal deck, I think, called Animal King Oracle. Love that. Prism Oracle by Nicole Pivirotto. Love that one, and I've mentioned all of those in my videos, whether I've talked about them in deck hauls, monthly favorites, etc., then you would have seen those. Dream Symbol Oracle deck, also definitely standing out for me. I love this one. This is by Copper Ray with illustration, but I have another one from hers that actually did make the top 5. I had to mention that. Mon Oracle de l'âme, definitely love that one. This is also another honorable mention. I've mentioned this in a deck haul, I think. It's a French deck I really enjoy. And finally, Wisdom for Healing cards is definitely an honorable mention as well. I've also mentioned this in favorite oracle videos, etc. If you check out the playlist Tarot Collection on my channel, you'll see me mention all of these decks at some point or another. Some other very honorable mention were the Oracle à haute vibration. I love that one. I mentioned it in a deck haul. I've used it a lot, especially on pick a card readings. It's great. Finally, one that almost made the cut. It's just because I've had it more recently than the others, so that's why it didn't quite make it, but I still really absolutely adore it. L'Oracle des Météores. I again talk about it in recent favorites. I talk about it in a deck haul. Those are all French decks I'm showing you, but they're all fantastic, and I'm actually going to do a separate video showing you French decks that I think you could enjoy as English speakers, which is why I don't feel so bad for including them in my top 5 Oracle decks of 2021, because they're going to get a dedicated video all about my French decks, how you might use them, which ones are easy to understand, which ones are a little bit harder, which ones are great even if you don't speak French at all. That's definitely going to be on the cards, pun intended. So let's start. These are in no particular order actually. I didn't really have a top 5 to top 1. Maybe I have a top 1 and 2, and the rest is like 3, 4 and 5 are in the mix. Let's start with a present from a dear friend of mine, Tanya, who gifted this to me for my birthday, and this is the Fantastic Beings Oracle by Rebecca Lefebvre. I have the mini version. I love this deck. It's a whole experience. So first off, the size is so cute. Look at it. I mean, I have very large hands, but this deck is definitely mini pocket edition, and the way that this deck is constructed is that on the front of the card you have an image of a fantastic being, except you don't see the entirety of the being, so you kind of have to guess what you're looking at, which I think adds mystery and interest to the deck. And then on the back you have the name of what the being is. You have a keyword and you have some text. And now this specific deck is dedicated to manifestation, manifesting, creativity, all of that. She has two other decks, one around plant and one around animals, and each of those have a different theme, and you can get those decks in the pocket version or in a regular oracle size. Check her website website. I'll leave all the details below as per usual. Love the fact that, you know, my friend gifted this to me. So on top of that, I bonded with this deck very quickly, and the messages are so potent. Even though it's mostly to do with manifestation, I find that it's helping me to get out of my funk, my life funk in general. So for me, I've used this deck not just for manifestation reading, but just for like daily card pull. Like I need some help, I need some guidance, I need some reason to live juice. Then this is gonna be the one I go to, one of them at least. I find the artwork really beautiful. I love the fact that we don't really know what we're looking at sometimes. Sometimes you're not sure which mythical creature or being you're looking at. Some of them are actually animals that do exist, you know, but more, for example, like sea creatures, etc. Some of them are places like Stonehenge. For me, with this deck, I've definitely had recurring cards, and then some of those cards I never see unless I don't read for myself. If I do pick a card readings and I use this deck, I will discover cards that I'm like, wait, what? There's this card in this deck, I've never seen it. It's one of those, and I use it, I draw a card a day for a month kind of thing. And so it's interesting to see the cards coming back. And the messages, they always resonate. And even if I get the same card 2 days in a row, it might be something where it's just one sentence that rings different, one word. The strengths of this deck are definitely for me the messages from Rebecca. I think she writes really well. Let me pull a card and you get a gist of what this reads like. Also, the experience of this deck, like tactile experience, is so good. Like I never talk about cardstock in my channel because I don't really care. I'm not a cardstock snob. As long as it doesn't disintegrate into my hands when I shuffle, I don't care about cardstock. I'll take anything as long as it's got nice imagery, but this is not laminated. It feels like art paper, and so it feels raw and just so nice to shuffle. This is like an old like ASMR vibe. So we have Willow, and I'm gonna read you the message. So the keyword for Willow is grace. When life's challenges begin to feel impossible and your world starts to cave in, envision the grace and embrace of the peaceful willow tree. Step through its long flowing branches and elongated leaves. Sit in rapture and soak in its healing powers. Visualize yourself bending and flexing as the wind gently lifts its limbs through the dappled sunlight. Take assurance knowing mistakes do happen, disappointments ignite introspection and awareness, and goals transform as wisdom grow. Be kind to yourself, you are learning. As you can see, the messages are very beautiful, and they're not your stereotypical oracle messages, I find. It's very poetic, I think, the way it's written, even though it's not literal poesy. Is that how you say it? Poesy? Poems? In French we say poésie. God, what do you say? It's nearly lunchtime, I'm clearly hungry. No, it's not literal poems, but it feels very poetic. And so this is my first pick. Let's move on to another surprise, but at the same time, very much like companion of this year for me, which is, I have the French version. This is Le Voyageur Sacré by Denise Linn, but this exists in English, and I think it's called Sacred Traveler Oracle by Denise Linn. And so this is new to me in 2021, but I know it's been out for a few years in English. If you watch my channel, you know that I love Denise Linn's Sacred Destiny. This is one of my ride or die oracle. I use it all the time. I need to give a shot to one of her other decks, see if I would bond with it as much as the Sacred Destiny, and I really did. Maybe it's not as good as the Sacred Destiny, okay? I don't think anything can take the Sacred Destiny out of my spot of, like, you know, my Hall of Fame, but this has definitely been a lovely guide, holding hand, companion for 2021. The Sacred Traveler's Oracle is not necessarily the prettiest deck I own. Look at those big ass purple borders. The backings are nice, but as you can see, the cardstock is super glossy. You know, in terms of like the production of it or the look of it, the aesthetic, I will say, it's not the most modern deck I have. The drawings are so whimsical, and so this, the Sacred Travelers, is destined to talk about your journey through life as if you were journeying through this mystical land that's kind of like fairy tale inspired, feels very like mythical. There's dragons and there's witches and there's like mermaids, I think. I really appreciate that, and this year particularly I appreciated its healing, comforting nature whilst I was journeying through some pretty major parts of my life. And this deck, even though it looks very sweet, it does have some more, I would say, difficult messages. It's not love and light, this deck. It does have some things that are telling you, you know, you're in the wrong space here. Like, you need to step back and reroute. Like, this is a dead end. You need to make a new path now. That's definitely some of the vibes of those cards, and I really like that about Denise Linn Oracle decks, is they don't feel light all the time. They are very well balanced. It's the same for the Sacred Destiny, so I really love that. And so now I'm definitely sold as to her ability to create balance. It feels like when you're lost, you need a bit of a indication as to where you're going. This was the deck for me for that, and I've used it for friends as well who really enjoy it because it's non-threatening. Even though some of the messages, like I said, are not necessarily always happy, it's not confronting or any sense. And I really love the fact as well that even though there's a guidebook with messages, the meanings are on the card, and so you get, like, you know, the keyword and you get a sentence, and that for me can be so good for when I just don't have time or don't have the mental headspace to sit there and try and figure out what the F I'm looking at. Sometimes I just want to pull a card, get my quick guidance of the day or answer a question, and I just want to get on with it, and I want to be sure, especially if it's for myself, that I know what I'm looking at and that my prism etc isn't getting in the way. And for those kind of readings, this has been fantastic. Let's move on to an indie oracle deck that I discovered this year that comes from, I believe, New Zealand. I think the creator is based on New Zealand. Their name of their shop on Etsy is Hand Me That Pencil, and they have created some oracle decks. I think they've got some tarot decks as well, and I just really love the vibe of their creation. But the one that stood out to me is this particular oracle, which is called There Is Always Light. Again, this feels very important for me when I need a bit of a healing message. Healing is a recurring theme on my channel because if you don't know, the last few years I've gone through some tremendous challenges in my health. And so of course healing has been a huge part of my journey because I've just had to completely change my life upside down because of some very deep health issues. And even though I'm doing so much better than I was, I'm still very much in the midst of the repercussion of that. I go to physical therapy like a few times a week to help my body recover, etc. But I also, of course, do a lot of emotional healing because when you get ill, there's a lot of trauma that comes from that, and so you have to heal that. And you know, physical health and emotional and kind of spiritual health, for me, they go hand in hand. So to help me on my healing journey, I don't just heal my body, I tend to try and heal myself as well, right? It's part of a whole process. That's how I look at it anyway. So all of that to say, this has been very helpful for, again, healing pulls, healing spreads, self-care. This has been very good for that. And did I say the name of this deck? It is called There Is Always Light. Already in the name, I find it very poetic and beautiful. So the way that this deck is constructed, when you get it, you don't get a guidebook, or maybe you get a PDF guidebook, I forgot. It comes with two parts. The first parts here are like almost like category cards that show you all the symbols that you will find on the card with keywords. And so those can act as reference card because they explain the symbols on that you can find on the cards with corresponding keywords, like I said. Or you can use them separately as a separate little oracle if you want to. For example, the way I've used that little bit separately, because you can add those in the cards, but because they don't have images, I don't really like to add this into my main oracle deck. I've kept this separately. Sometimes I reference the keyword, the symbol that I found on my illustrated cards, and I will reference the keywords, etc. Sometimes I use this separately to create a spread as well. So I'll shuffle just those cards that have keywords, etc. on them, and then create a spread with that. That has been super fun. Really love creating spreads, etc. Sometimes I like free flow reading where I just pull cards have a conversation with my deck, my higher self or my guides or etc. But sometimes I like to construct, to have structure, so it's all about balance, I guess. And then the majority of the deck is consisted of rated cards, and so this deck again is set in a fantasy world. Can you feel a theme here? What can I say? I like to escape. Apparently, even if I'm confined to the four walls of my bedroom, using decks like this, I am able to get somewhere else through the power of imagination. And also, I just think the art is very beautiful. So I find that this deck reads beautifully, and what I love about this deck is that because it's called There Is Always Light, there is always light in those images. Somewhere or around the card you're going to see streams of sunlight, or a lantern, or a light at the end of the tunnel. You're gonna see a house lit up or something. There's always a place, a source of light in this deck. And so in that way, it's really a powerful reminder that there is always hope. That no matter what we go through, there's always something there to be grateful for. That there's always a spark inside us ready to burn the bridge, to help us get where we need to help us light the way, to light the path. And it has a nice touch on diversity without being overly in your face about it. I like that. I like that it's subtly inclusive, and I think it's beautiful in that way. For example, we have the representation of a being here that challenges gender binary standards, because we have a very masculine looking chest, and yet their face is very made up and beautiful. You know, we have this beautiful makeup, etc. And I find that it's a beautiful representation of challenging binary kind of gender constructs. So in that way, there's that kind of layer, subtle layer to it, which I appreciate as well. It gives me a lot of hope. It breathes wonderfully. I've paired it with many tarot decks, and together they pair beautifully. You can pair it with modern decks, you can pair it with fantasy decks, you can pair it with shadow work decks, and it just works really well. Oh, and I forgot to say, the backings are all different colors, which I love. I think that's really cool. I love colorful things. Okay, that's 3. Let's move on to my next pick, and this is a French deck. I had to include a French deck, and I decided to, in my top 5, include an indie French deck, because this is truly a beautiful oracle deck, and it's truly a beautiful discovery for me for 2021, and it is the Mystic Healing Oracle by Linné in the Moon. Linné, she has a really great Instagram page. If you don't follow her, I highly suggest to do so. She posts beautiful imagery that she creates, whether paintings, collage style, etc. And so she's got a great Instagram account, and she shares in English and in French, so that's amazing. So this deck, as you can see, it comes in, it doesn't come in with a guidebook. I think you can get a PDF one, potentially, don't quote me on that, but it does definitely come with title cards where you're gonna have the name of the card in French, because all the cards are named in French, but then on this you get the translation in English and in Spanish of what the French keyword means. So this way you can reference. So for example, if you get the card passé, which is this one, this is past in English and pasado in Spanish, I think. Is that it? Oh yeah! I'm so proud of myself. This is an indie deck, so you can get it straight from Linné's website. Again, I will leave the information down below in the description box. And this is a beautiful, beautiful kind of mixed art oracle deck. What do you say that? Mixed art? I mean, there's paintings, there's collage. Keywords are very interesting. Like I said, you can translate them through her little sheet. And the artwork is beautiful. This is one of my favorite cards ever, Initiation. I meditated, I had this visualization, this vision in my meditation. Then I did an oracle reading, and this is the card I pulled, and it was exactly what I had seen in my vision, you know, in my meditation. And that happened to me quite a few times with this deck, and so for that reason it's very deep. This deck really feels like crone energy almost, in the sense that it has a lot of cards referring to ancestors and genealogy and where you come from and sacrifice and initiations, and just this idea of you don't know everything, like sit down and take and listen because you don't know shit. This is kind of the vibe of this deck. Look at this grandmother card. That's how it reads for me anyway. This kind of like grandma feel of like, I know better than you, so you better sit down and let me tell you how it is. Because you've not been here nearly as long enough as me. I don't know why. This is the vibe that I definitely get for this deck. Again, good balance of light and shadow cards, and oh, this is one of my favorite cards. Look at that meditation. It's beautiful. What was I saying? Oh, look at this potion. I get distracted. See, looking at pretty artwork, I'm like, oh, but look, it's so pretty. Potion card is really cool. So, regroup, Marine. What the fuck am I talking about now? Yes. This oracle deck includes mothers. There's like, I think 12 cards that represent almost goddess energy, like divine feminine energy. They don't represent, I think, a particular goddess, minus Pachamama, who's included. Otherwise, it's more archetype of divine energy, and so you have those cards in that you can use separately, almost like major arcana cards, or that you can include them in. I mix them all in, and I think that gives it that really beautiful divine feminine edge. But again, for me, this deck has very much crone energy to it. Gorgeous. I've used it for myself. I've used it on my channel in pick a card readings. It reads beautifully. One of my favorite readings that I did this year, which didn't get that many views, but you know what? It doesn't even matter. I didn't do it for the views. But it's definitely one of my favorites reading I've done. One of the most potent ones where the messages were so moving was which goddess has a message for you. I'll try and remember to leave a card somewhere here. I use this deck and some other decks where we try and explore which goddess has a message for you, and the way this deck came through with the information that was needed to be told was, I have no words. And you know me, I can talk for England, France, Europe, and the whole of the Southern Hemisphere. Nice little note here that Line sent. She's just a really sweet person and great creator, so definitely go and support her work. Okay, I have one that I want to include in my top 5, but technically it's out of print, so it doesn't really count, right? So this is the one before last. Maybe it's a tie, so technically I cheated, but one of them is out of print, and so I didn't want that to be my only top one. I don't want to create FOMO, etc., but I do really love it, so I also want to be transparent with you. So anyway, it's a tie. So my first pick for this first place tie is the illustration oracle deck. I think she called it Inktiber Oracle by Copper Rabbit Illustration, and this is out of print, which is why I wanted to put it as a tie on my first top, because you can't find it anymore. She doesn't print this deck anymore, but she does have some other really beautiful oracle deck called the Dreams Symbol Oracle, which I also really love. And so if you enjoy this kind of imagery, check out her work. I'll put the link in the description box below. Here are the backs, and they're orange with little froggies, which I love. An oracle that Copper Rabbit Illustrations created after doing a Inktober challenge, you know, one of those where you have to draw one thing a day for a month. And so this was all of her creation for that month. I don't know for which year, maybe 2019 or 2018, I'm not sure. And this is a new to my collection. I think I was probably one of the last one to get it. When I bought it, she said she didn't have many left. But this one is fully focused on fairy tales, and more so the dark fairy tales. Darker mermaids, the sea witches, the dark forest. And it doesn't come with a guidebook. It is purely supposed to be used intuitively, and yet it speaks so clearly to me. I use this deck intuitively, and it's like beautiful. It tells me stories, it helps me analyze my dream, it helps me communicate with my guides, it helps me to think outside the box. It is a beautiful reader for me for anything really intuitive. I just really adore this deck, and I have something about this artist imagery that it just it speaks to my soul. I don't know why. I really bond with her artwork and with her aesthetic, and this deck is it's just very special to me, so I had to include this one. I don't use it the same way I use any other deck really, because it's, you know, again, there's no guidebook. I've assigned my own meanings behind them and it just flows, and so this one is a huge favorite. I've used it a ton for my personal practice in 2021. I've also used it in pick a card readings and things like that to pair, and it reads beautifully. And this is the Inktober Oracle deck by Copper Rabbit Illustration. My last deck out of my top 5 Oracle decks. Kind of cheated, top 6. Surprise! Are you surprised? Maybe not. This is the Star Dragons Oracle cards by Los Scarabeo, and I love this deck. I love this deck because I love dragons. Look at, this is one of my favorite pieces of jewelry. Can you see that? I'm trying to be like beauty influencer right there. Look at that. This is one of my favorite pieces of jewelry. This is my dragon ring. Very subtle and low-key, much like the whole of my aesthetic really. I'm a very minimalist, low-key kind of person, if you couldn't tell. The Star Dragons Oracle card by Los Scarabeo. I found it in a deck haul. He mentioned it in favorites after that, but I love this deck very, very much. It comes with a really nice little guidebook, so it does have different languages. You have Italian, you have Spanish, you have English, and Czech, I think. You don't have French, which is rude. I'm kidding, it's fine. This is a dragon deck, if you couldn't tell by the title, and you know I love dragons, and I didn't have a dragon deck before. My first and only Dragon Oracle deck. I have this one and I'm good to go now. I've actually ordered a Dragon Tarot, the one, the Oak, Ash and Embers Tarot, no, Smoke, Ash and Embers Tarot by 3 Tree Tarot, an independent company in the UK that make beautiful decks, and so they're bringing out a dragon deck next year. Which looks so beautiful, so I've pre-ordered that from Tarot Lover Heart. But in terms of Oracle, this is the only one I have, and to be honest, I think this is the only one I want. You have two parts. You have some that have a green backings, and there's more of those, and then you have about, I think, six or seven cards that have a red backing, and by red backing I mean just literally this tiny little red dot here. So either the dot is red or the dot is green. That's how you differentiate. The first 5 or 6 cards that have the red dots, they are corresponding more to almost like kind of major arcana vibes, in the sense that they are corresponding to bigger theme, and that can help you understand how your reading is concerned in terms of bigger things in life. So we have a space card, we have a resource card, so they can kind of indicate what you need more of, or which is the general theme of the reading, etc. Which is interesting, and you can read them separately or add them in. To be fair, I've often just added them in. The remainder of the deck is consisted of stunning digital artwork with dragons, and this is everything my dragon lover hearts wants. We have water dragons, we have fire dragons, we have earth dragons. There's everything you need, and they are beautiful. There's like really interesting depth to this deck, which is that it's not just dragons, it is star dragons. So with every card there's a dragon, but also its companion, friend, guardian, however you want to look at it, which is usually a little being that kind of looks very fae ish, and that being represents a constellation because it's called Star Dragon. So on every card you have a constellation linked, and actually on every card you can see the constellation in the artwork. 2 keywords on the card. You have 1 keyword that corresponds to the message of the dragon, and 1 keyword that corresponds to the message of the constellation being, the star being. And together they make really interesting energies, because the star beings' messages in the guidebooks are a lot more cool, calm and collected, maybe more distance, what you would expect from that kind of energy, very cosmic energy, whereas the dragon's energy is like, burn it! Which I love! The dragons are very direct, straight to the point. You don't have time for that, it's time to move on, you're better than that, own your power, let's go. When I use this deck, I either use it intuitively and not look at the guidebook and just go off the images and the keywords, and that's been wonderful, especially if I pair it with tarot. But when I have done readings for myself where I've decided to look at the guidebook. I read both the messages and they both are really interesting. A lot of different ways you could read this deck. You can choose one keyword, two keywords, use the guidebook, don't use the guidebook, refer to the constellation. If you know about astrology and astronomy, don't refer to the constellation. There's so much there. And mostly it's very beautiful. This artwork is stunning. I will say the only thing I don't like about this deck is that there's only 33 cards, I think. Scarabeo, why did you do us dirty like that? It just, 33 cards feels a bit Scrooge to me. Like, this is very like Four of Pentacles vibe. You could have given us a little bit more. But it's dragons, so I'll forgive it. And obviously I've forgiven it well enough that it's in my top 5. So my friends, this is it. These were my top 5 Oracle decks for 2021. The one that came into my collection this year that really stood out. Again, I could have done a top 10. Honestly, there's so many great decks that came in, but I was trying to be very focused. And I am going to be doing my French decks video, so I hope you're excited about that. Let me know in the comments down below what your favorite top 5 Oracle decks of 2021 were, whether they were decks that are new or old or whatever, just your top 5 of 2021. I would love to know. I love talking to you in the comments. If you have enjoyed this video, please don't hesitate to give my video a thumbs up. It does really help my channel to grow. It's a nice little way to support, and I really appreciate it. And until my next video, as per usual, I am sending you so much good vibes and keep navigating the waves of your soul.